Good evening and a very warm welcome to the distinguished gathering assembled here in this room once again. We are assembled in person after a hiatus of 2 years. Last year was an online forum when we gathered together at the Raisina Dialogue in front of our computer screens. So very good evening, Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission and our chief guest for this evening, Honorable External Affairs Minister Mr. Jaishankar, partners in the Ministry of External Affairs, ministers, admirals, delegates, experts gathered from 100 countries, and our young Raisina fellows in this room. We host this year the Raisina Dialogue, I must confess, with some trepidation. Now, this dialogue was created as a venue for conversations between global statesmen, thinkers, leaders across politics, government, businesses, media, civil society, you name it, a vast array of expertise to bring it together in the rooms of the Taj Palace. I speak with trepidation because even as we were battling to recover from the devastation struck by this once-in-a-century pandemic, we were also struck by two other bolts which just came out of the blue. The first saw a dark veil descend over Afghanistan in our neighborhood. That was August 2021. And the second has just redrawn the Iron Curtain across the heart of Europe. The Raisina Dialogue 2022 takes place in the lengthening shadow of these events. And our theme for the year, Terra Nova, impassioned, impatient, and imperiled, seeks to interrogate our responses as a global community to all three watersheds. We endeavor to discover how we find ourselves today on a rather unfamiliar planet that looks and feels very, very different from the one we had gathered to discuss in person just before the pandemic struck in 2020. Have we moved forward in these 2 years only to go back? Just as the collapse of Kabul in 2021 was seeking to signal a new geoeconomic architecture that sought to respond to the strategic competition of the 21st century, February 24th threw us back into the old bipolar global order of a bitter Cold War that the world should have relegated to history books 30 years ago. And together, the pandemic, Kabul, February 24th, these three events today force us to examine the political undergirding of what has become a rapidly deglobalizing world. The cracks in the multilateral liberal system are now tectonic rifts. And if history is any indication, such a confluence of event chains coalescing together can alter global power dynamics and reshape the world order. And that is the kind it's been spoken of as inflection point, and that is the reason. Now, a pandemic that should have brought us together ended up exposing the limits of transnational cooperation. We divided the world into the haves and the have-nots. We recreated the rifts which we had again forgotten between the North and the South. It made us acutely aware of the frailties of global public goods, of supply chains, of global institutions. Large tech companies gained influence across a multitude of sectors, from financial services to healthcare, and regulators were struggling to keep pace. Authoritarian states perfected the use of technology for controlling lives, and technology itself spawned a new generation of deep fakes that brought us to the post-truth era. Our health, our safety, our well-being are all become part of someone else's business model. We don't control them. And the sanctions following the conflict in Ukraine now undermine trust in the integrity and the cohesiveness of the global financial system. which was once considered the backbone of global value chains of global innovation and climate action, unfortunately, has been reduced to trending hashtags and empty speeches, even as the taps of green finance and green technology continue to run dry. So we are in the midst of a perfect storm, and our assumptions are shaken. It is no longer the time to hark back to a pre-pandemic normal. It no longer exists. The riddle as that normal was with inequality and exclusion. This is the time for a new, unknown world. A time to talk coherently about what is substantive, what is sustainable, and thereby make the right choices. And this is the challenge right here for all of us in New Delhi at Raisina 2022. The war in Ukraine sadly continues, but we believe so must this dialogue that gathers diversity across 100 countries and gives us perhaps some reason for hope. Madam Excellency, there's no better way to commence these conversations at the Raisina Dialogue than to have you here to deliver tonight's inaugural address. I recall welcoming you to the ORF in 2015 as a Minister of Defense, then of the Federal Republic of Germany, and today it gives me even greater pleasure to have you as the Chief of the European Union. Madam, the floor is yours.
Prime Minister Modi, Excellencies, Ambassadors, distinguished guests. Every 5 years, when Indians are casting their vote in parliamentary elections, the world watches with admiration as the world's largest democracy charts its future path. Because the outcome of decisions made by 1.3 billion people resonates around the globe. This is especially true for Europe. As vibrant democracies, India and the European Union share fundamental values and common interests. Together, we believe in each country's right to determine its own destiny. Together, we believe in the rule of law and fundamental rights. And together, we believe that it is democracy that best delivers for citizens. So, despite our geographic distance and despite the different languages we speak, when we look at each other, we do not meet as strangers, but as close friends. Democracy was born more than 2,000 years ago in Europe, but today its largest home is India. For the European Union, strengthening and energizing its partnership with India is a priority in this upcoming decade. Both our economies thrive in a world of common rules and fair competition. And we share the same interests in safe trading routes, in seamless supply chains, and in a free and open Indo-Pacific. Both our regions are driving forces in the digital revolution, and this makes us natural partners in setting global standards to make sure that the rules of the analog world also count in the digital domain. And of course, both India and the European Union are key in the transition to a more sustainable and green future for our planet. So we must pool our strength in the fight against climate change. It's so urgent. And this is our common responsibility, not only towards the global community, but mostly towards the next generation. However, our values are not shared by everyone. We all see the rising challenges to our open and free societies. This is true for the technological and the economic domain, but it is also true for security. The reality is that the core principles that underpin peace and security across the world are at stake, in Asia as well as in Europe. The images coming from Russia's attack on Ukraine have shocked and are shocking the whole world. 2 weeks ago, I visited Bucha, the suburb of Kyiv, which was devastated by Russian troops as they withdrew from the north of Ukraine. I saw with my own eyes the bodies lined up on the ground. I saw the mass graves. I listened to survivors of atrocious crimes the Kremlin soldiers committed. I saw the scars of bombed schools and resident houses and hospitals. These are severe violations of international law, targeting and killing innocent civilians, redrawing borders by force, subjugating the will of a free people. This goes against core principles enshrined in the UN Charter. In Europe, we see Russia's aggression as a direct threat to our security. We will make sure that the unprovoked and unjustified aggression against Ukraine will be a strategic failure. This is why we're doing all we can to help Ukraine fight for its freedom. This is why we immediately imposed massive, sharp, and effective sanctions. Sanctions are never a standalone solution. They are embedded in a broader strategy that has diplomatic and security elements. And this is why we have designed the sanctions in a way to sustain them over a longer period of time, because this gives us leverage to achieve a diplomatic solution that will bring lasting peace. And we urge all members of the international community to support our efforts for lasting peace. And if we consider what it means for Europe and Asia, that Russia and China have forged a seemingly unrestrained pact, they have declared that the friendship between them has no limits, that there are no forbidden areas of cooperation. This was in February this year. And then the invasion of Ukraine followed. What can we expect from the new international relations that both have called for? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a defining moment. Our decisions in these days will shape decades to come. Our response to Russia's aggression today will decide the future of both the international system and the global economy. Will heinous devastation win, or humanity prevail? Will the right of might dominate, or the rule of law? Will there be constant conflict and struggle, or a future of common prosperity and lasting peace? What happens in Ukraine will have an impact on the Indo-Pacific region. It already has. Countries battered by 2 years of COVID pandemic must deal now with rising prices for grain, energy, and fertilizers as a direct result of Putin's war of choice. Thus, the outcome of the war will not only determine the future of Europe, but also deeply affect the Indo-Pacific region and the rest of the world. For the Indo-Pacific region, it is as important as for Europe that borders are respected and that spheres of influence are rejected. We want a positive vision for a peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. The region is home to half of the world's population and 60% of the global GDP. Our vision is that the Indo-Pacific region remains free and open and becomes more interconnected, prosperous, secure, and resilient, with an open and rules-based security architecture that serves all interests. To this end, we will deepen our engagement with our partners in the region, including ASEAN. On China, we will continue to encourage Beijing to play its part in a peaceful and thriving Indo-Pacific region. The relationship between the European Union and China is simultaneously strategically important and challenging. All at once, China is a negotiating partner, an economic competitor, and a systemic rival. We will continue our multifaceted engagement. We will continue to cooperate on tackling common challenges, and we will protect our essential interests and promote our values. And on this foundation of engagement in the Indo-Pacific region, we seek to build a new common agenda for the 21st century. One major item on this agenda is the need around the world for massive investment to overcome the fallout of the COVID pandemic and to modernize their economies. And as a consequence, some countries have been forced to take unsustainable offers. They face a situation where they do not fully control their own infrastructure, be it seaports or airports, be it bridges or railways. But investments in our future should never come at the expense of a country's independence. Throughout the 2020s, developing Asian countries will need to invest more than 5% of their gross domestic product to meet the infrastructure needs of their own fast-growing economies. This means globally over $1.7 trillion per year. The needs are massive, but so are the opportunities. This is why we have introduced Global Gateway. Global Gateway is Europe's vision for investment in clean and sustainable global infrastructure. Global Gateway will enable up to 300 billion euros to support major infrastructure priorities around the world. From clean energy to digitalization, you name it, our offer will be transparent and values-driven. With Europe, what you see is what you get. And let me focus on specifically 2 points. First, on climate action. And here, let me take energy. Energy demand, for example, in India, has doubled since 2000. And this is good news, because it means better living conditions for millions of people. Over the next 20 years, India will need an additional energy capacity that is equal to the entire European energy consumption, additional. So the question is, will this energy be clean? Or will it poison our air that we breathe? Will the energy be renewable and homegrown? Or will it increase our dependency and allow for blackmail in the future? I was very glad, Prime Minister, to hear that you declared that India will be energy independent before it celebrates its 100th birthday of the country's independence in 2047. So the choices made today are crucial, not just for this great nation, but for the whole world. Global Gateway could bring, for example, to India and Bangladesh more hydropower produced in Nepal and Bhutan. It could build clean hydrogen infrastructure to power up your heavy industries. Just yesterday, I visited the headquarters of the International Solar Alliance. This is a great partnership launched by Prime Minister Modi and now bringing together 86 countries. So it's innovation at the service of people, because the International Service Alliance will benefit most the least developed countries and the small island developing states. And given the geopolitical and climate challenges we face, the business case today for solar is stronger than ever. So we should massively scale it up also through Global Gateway for the benefit of our common prosperity and the planet we all share. We also can help the climate when saving energy. I know this sounds obvious, but in a country the size of India, the sum of many small individual decisions can have a tremendous overall impact in the end. Just think of this example. As prices drop dramatically, in recent years, millions of Indians switched from using traditional old light bulbs to modern LED lighting technology. This resulted in annual energy savings of 30 terawatt hours. This is roughly enough to power 28 million average Indian households for a year, just by saving, or for the whole of Denmark, just through saving energy. So there's really big time potential in energy efficiency and energy savings. We also need to strengthen our cooperation in the digital field. This is my second point. Because cutting-edge technology is at the heart of our future cooperation. And Asia is a powerhouse when it comes to new technologies, from artificial intelligence to quantum computing. Our cooperation is about more than investment and infrastructure. It is about talent and technology based on fundamental values, on standards, for example. Today, India and the European Union both recognize that we are better off when we develop global standards for new technologies such as 5G, instead of seeking separate national solutions. And we share many of the same values when it comes to the digital world. We share the idea that privacy should be guaranteed online as well as offline, and that technology should enhance individual freedom, not the state's ability to control us. Think about data protection. European companies outsource many of their IT processes to Indian companies. Europe generates almost 1/3 of the revenues for the Indian business process outsourcing sector. And with equivalent rules, we could unlock even greater data flows between our regions with immense benefits for the companies in our respective regions. As I said earlier, for the European Union, the partnership with this region is one of our most important relationships for the coming decade, and strengthening this partnership is a priority for the European Union. Our strategic cooperation should take place at the nexus of trade, trusted technology, and security, notably in respect of challenges posed by rival governance models. And therefore, I am very pleased that today Prime Minister Modi and I have agreed to establish an EU-India Trade and Technology Council to tackle key trade, economic, and technological challenges. And as like-minded partners, the European Union and India will be working on several tracks. We have launched negotiations on a free trade agreement, as well as on investment protection and geographical indications. For Europe, this is a strategic investment in our partnership with India. The European Union is India's third most important trade partner, but we can do so much more. Our trade is far below our potential, both for Indian and European goods and services. So this deal will bring new technologies, new investment, an unprecedented integration into shared value chains. We are the two largest democracies in the world, and together we have a lot to give for the benefit of the people. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living indeed in a terra nova, as the title of this year's Raisina Dialogue suggests. We all have to choose whether we want a terra nova to be wild, dangerous, and an unlivable place, or a better home for all humankind. I am convinced that democracies will have a crucial role to play in defining the world of tomorrow. I want Europe to be a partner for Asia in shaping this new world, a world of independent yet interconnected countries, working together for a more prosperous and peaceful world, working together for the benefit of humankind. Thank you very much for your attention.
May I now request the Honorable External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, to propose a vote of thanks.
Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, President von der Leyen, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to propose the vote of thanks at the inaugural of the 6th Raisina Dialogue. In 2015, Prime Minister, you gave us the task of creating a Make in India, Make for the World platform to debate contemporary issues. This reflected both your confidence in shaping the global agenda, as well as in the strength of our summoning powers. It would express both the rebalancing and the multipolarity that characterizes our times. This dialogue has been the most successful of our many responses to your call. 7 years later, we have today in our midst 1,200 participants drawn from 99 nations, ready to hear 100 panels and conversations. And I can say this with all humility, that the Raisina Dialogue is among the best in its class. Among the geographies that have partnered this endeavor as it developed, Europe has clearly stood out. It is therefore only fitting that the keynote address today should be delivered by President von der Leyen of the European Commission. She and Prime Minister Modi were the co-chairs of the 27+1 EU summit at Porto in May 2021 that has set new directions for our partnership. Her personal leadership was largely responsible for the impetus given to the initiatives designed to take our ties to the next level. These include an FTA, an investment agreement, and a geographical indications agreement. Earlier today, we announced the launching of the Trade and Technology Council as well. This coordination mechanism will facilitate our working together on expanded trade, on trusted technologies, and on security. The European Union has already articulated an Indo-Pacific and a connectivity strategy, respectively, that contributes to our convergence. Our climate action, digital, and other conversations are getting increasingly serious. And as we have heard, the EU is approaching global challenges with a much sharper strategic awareness. Indeed, these are the subjects of discussions at this very dialogue. Let me therefore conclude by thanking President von der Leyen for her very thoughtful address that has set the tone for our deliberations. Our collective appreciation, naturally, to Prime Minister Modi, who remains the inspiration for this dialogue. I recognize the commitment of the organizers, Observer Research Foundation, whose painstaking preparations are so visible, and I'm sure that you all equally applaud. And not least, I thank all participants and those who have joined us virtually for being part of this exciting journey. Thank you very much.
So this brings us to the close of this inauguration session. I will request you all to remain seated. The Honorable Prime Minister and Her Excellency President von der Leyen will leave the room. We will open the doors at some point, but till then remain seated and please do not crowd near the door as we move out. There are dinners that you can join and you would have received invitations, and we'll proceed to those venues. Thank you very much, sir.